Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. Of course, we'll be talking about the constitutional amendments in the National Assembly. What do we expect in terms of the number game? Does the government have the numbers or not? That is what, where the buck stops. But of course, we've seen the Information Minister speak today, and he said that these reforms have been on the agenda, for a while. All parties have expressed from time to time that there need to be judicial amendments. Two, that they are not person specific, there was a lot that was said earlier on the media, and all of those rumors have proven to be wrong till now. In the sense that what we have at this time, we'll be talking about the kind of amendments that seem to be on the agenda. Of course, we don't know yet. Also, he said that the need for measures to ensure speedy justice have been there for a long time. We know that that is an issue with our judicial system. We know that judicial reform have been on the agenda for a long time. And if the agenda of these reforms is to give relief to the common man, to give relief to those that wait for years and years and generations to get redressal, then there seems to be no opinion on whether these reforms should go forward or not. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Zahid Gishkori, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us. We have with us in the studio Daniyal Sheikh, who's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us. And Barrister Ummar, Ziauddin, who's a legal expert. Thank you for being with us today. Let me go to Zahid Saab. Zahid Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, Mahrukh, I can.
Zahid Saab, what is the position in the NA? I know that you are closely keeping an eye on the situation. Can you tell us what you perceive to be the situation at this time?
Thank you very much, Mahrukh. The situation is quite interesting, uncertain, and nobody knows about it. That either government is successful to gain the required number yet or not. But from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., there have been meetings of different political parties. Either it's parliamentary parties sitting on on the treasury benches, whether it's opposition party, but situation is quite interesting. There could be anything to gain the magic number, but at this stage of time, it looks like that perhaps tonight it would be difficult for the government to gain the number because the consultation process is going on. I, as a reporter, have been meeting different members of the parliament, and when we are discussing this on your show, just 35 minutes ago, Information Minister told us that the consultation process still goes on. It means that it would be difficult tonight, but it could happen because it has been down the line around.
Zahid Saab, let me interject here. The key players at this time in terms of the number game are, of course, Maulana Saab and his party, but also we've seen Akhtar Mengal. So, in terms of the negotiations there, what do you perceive? Let's talk about Maulana Saab. Do you think that he's amenable? He hasn't, of course, like you said, negotiations are in process. So there hasn't been, there's no at this time.
I personally think, and my information suggests that Maulana perhaps agrees upon, and government remains successful to convince Maulana to vote for this constitutional package. The delay in process, because I think there might be government is facing a shortage of three-member National Assembly, 3 numbers in the National Assembly. Perhaps upper house is still convincing for the government because as Maulana has yet to make announcement that he is going to support the government in this constitution package. But by and large, as we talk about this, to JUF leadership and many other lawmakers who have been engaged in the same discussion and negotiation, it looks like that Maulana would go with the government. But the problem is that there are still 3 numbers, which could be called the magic numbers, government could convince the independent member National Assembly to vote for this constitution package. And this is perhaps the reason. And there were two numbers also in the Senate as well, as government were in the negotiation with Dr. Mangal, who two members in the Senate of Pakistan were also perhaps in to be or not to be situation. Either they would be voting for this constitution package or not. But it looks like that it might be difficult tonight, but perhaps tomorrow or maybe on Wednesday, government perhaps would get the possible outcome of.
Please stay with us. I'll just come back to you. I'm going to go to Daniyal. Daniyal, what is the opposition to these amendments, considering that we know now that they don't seem to be person specific at all from what we have at this time?
Well, not just this constitutional amendment. Generally speaking, constitutional amendments are very different from the day-to-day affairs of the government or the functioning of the government. So, considering that, like for example, Akhtar Mangal, he's for a very long time I've heard him say that Balochistan Assembly, it's got such a big, large landmass, and we've got such little representation. So today, if he hypothetically opposes it or does not become part of it, so that principle stand that he had for so long, he's basically negating it. And same goes with Maulana. Maulana is, like, despite his differences with the current government, we cannot question his patriotism and his resolve for the betterment of Pakistan. So considering that, I think they should all look above their party.
But what do you think? I
positions.
mean, what was earlier said by PTI also? What is the opposition primarily? What was the crux of it, in your opinion?
So as far as PTI is concerned, I don't even think that they looked into it in detail when they anything that comes to them, it just becomes an issue of political point scoring. Anyone who looks into at least the amendments that are being shown on television, anyone who looks into it, I don't think any patriotic Pakistani could oppose them. There is no reasoning to oppose it because they're all in interests of the public.
Do you think it was just before, it was preemptive rather than, just opposing for the sake of opposing? They haven't really, I mean, they don't know what they're opposing at this time.
Absolutely. Like I said, like the things that I went through, anyone, if they read it and try to understand it, I don't think they should have an issue, because it's going to benefit the entire country, not just a political party.
Fair enough. Ummar, as legally speaking, as a lawyer, we've spoken about this before also, with numerous governments. I'm not saying today, but 5 years ago, even 7 years ago, there has been need for judicial reform.
Yeah.
And we've seen Chief Justices come who've tried to do it on a case-to-case basis, or tried to do it in in different ways, which were later criticized also. If you understand what I'm saying, overall, the need for judicial reform has certainly been there.
Absolutely. And the biggest reform that we need is the appointment process of the judges. As we speak right now, we don't know if it is part of the constitutional package, and perhaps this is the only criticism at this point in time, such a big package of constitutional reform, and nobody's really seen the text of it. But in principle, I don't think that there's any opposition as yet, especially regarding judicial reforms. Another thing which is being thrown around is the Constitutional Court, the Federal Constitutional Court. Now, it is there in the civil law jurisdictions. Understand it's there in Germany, understand it's there in France. It will be a new introduction to a common law jurisdiction for a country like Pakistan. But this in itself is not a problem. We just have to wait for more details to come out for us to assess on how it falls within our legislative and judicial structure.
Okay, let's talk about this. As far as the amendments, what we have at this time, we don't know, like you said, the whole text. But there are more than 20 clauses of the Constitution that have been included, it seems, in the constitutional amendments. Article 51, amending Article 51, what is the problem with that, in your opinion?
No problem. This is the article that addresses the representation in the parliament. You're giving more seats to Balochistan, so there's nothing wrong with it.
63.
So 63 is dodgy. 63 addresses the defection clause. It was for the first time introduced through a 14th amendment, and it was seen and it was brought in its present form in the 18th amendment. Both N and People's Party were involved in bringing the text to its present form from the initial introduction of it into the Constitution. I understand that it's being revisited, and it's just an interesting issue to take up, possibly because to address the issue at this point in time of numbers, we may not have all the numbers, and there's a view of the Supreme Court that those defecting, not only will they end up losing their seats, but their votes will not count. So perhaps this is the reason that prevails at this point in time to revisit it. But please, I say it with a lot of caution, with a lot of sense of responsibility. We've not seen the actual text of 63 and whether it addresses 63A to begin with.
Right, fair enough. But there are, of course, a lot of different opinions on 63A also.
Yeah.
Whether it should have, whether there should be a defection clause at all.
I think I'm the one who's written in print in the past that there should be no defection clause, there should be no disqualification on the ground of defection. I held that view on the ground that it is anti-democratic. So not everything that was introduced through 18th Amendment was entirely a gain in terms of constitutional jurisprudence in Pakistan. But that's just my personal view.
Principally speaking, I want to talk more about this also, and since it is, law related, that generally speaking, when you, like you said, empowering the legislature, empowering the members in the National Assembly, the right to change your mind, so to speak, the crux of democracy, and whether, this is wrong, like you said, and you've expressed an opinion that there's nothing really wrong with doing away with this at all.
For instance, I and most of the other like-minded lawyers like me will support the idea that there should be rotation of judges, not just to the extent of Islamabad High Court. I hope it applies across board so that there's no element of discrimination and there's greater transparency. It happens in other jurisdictions. It happens in India as well. So the idea that there's a rotation of judges for Islamabad, we will welcome that move as lawyers.
Let's talk more about that in a little bit. I'm going to go to Zahid Saab. Zahid Saab, there is, as far as increasing the representation in Balochistan Assembly is concerned, there doesn't seem to be any, we don't know anybody who would disagree with that, right? And the numerous provisions that have come, there are very few that are really, perhaps debatable. Would you agree with that?
I think, Mahrukh, so far I know the couple of floated amendment of the proposed constitution package, by and large, is good for the legislation. It's good for the parliament to increasing number of members in the provincial assembly of Balochistan. And this package carries some good things as well, either to empower the prime minister to choose one of 4 senior judges. Any of them prime minister can choose as Chief Justice of Pakistan, like he does from the armed forces. So there are some other things to increase 3-year, maybe 2-year the age of government employees, and there was some sort of suggestion from IMF as well, and the burden of pensioner on the government national exchequer. And there are so many things that are good, but somehow the situation and to linking it to the current Chief Justice tenure to extend it for 3 more years, and the controversies, and that's what the card being played by the opposition. So I think government and the opposition and so many other things, but I want you to give me some time to complete the argument, because the one thing is very important. In the past 2.5 years, what happened in Pakistan, the uncertain situation, and the parliament have been in the hang. It could not pass the powerful legislation which the state needs otherwise at this stage of time. If the government succeeds to get past this constitutional package, I think and I can predict that in the coming 3 years, government could absolutely attain the purpose, not only to suppress its opposition, to go for what exactly it wants to do, and secondly, there could be the certain situation, rather than to get rid of this uncertainty prevailed in the state, in the country in the past 2.5 years. So symbolically, and the actions being done by the government, so it could be a win-win situation for the government to get out the country from the crisis, what exactly they want to do. And because this constitution package not only carries all these things, but also carries to decide about military code, to decide many other things as well, because purportedly there are more than 22 such clauses which could be amended, because government putting it with hard, because they don't want to create more controversy if it becomes public. And this is the only reason that JUF, which carries the magic number, they want to see the draft first. And they have shared it. And I think this could be a decisive moment for political purpose. If the government succeeded, it means that in the coming 3 years, it would be calling the shot what exactly they want to do. But if it fails, then it means that then the opposition would carry a strong hold, and the opposition and the Supreme Court of Pakistan. There could be so many controversies now associated directly or indirectly with the country's Supreme Court, and the judges' issues and their age factors and the oversee and the observations and the check by the parliamentary committee on the role of judges.
If it goes through, then it would end most of the controversies, and of course, like you said, be a smooth sailing for the government from there on.
Absolutely, Mahrukh. I think this is the decisive moment, not only for the government, for the state, for the country and the institution as well, because in the past 6 months, what happened, there are so many things which are associated, that controversies in alleged rigging by the opposition in 2024 elections, tribunal issues, and the issue of reserve seat, which we have been discussing in your program, and the powers of Election Commission of Pakistan, and the interpretation done by Supreme Court, and we yet to see the detailed judgment, but Supreme Court called spade yesterday that what it has done and what Election Commission has to do with it. And there are so many things were pending. The Senate of Pakistan is not complete at the moment, and still we have to witness the election in KPK for the Senate, and reserve seats and tribunal resolutions. So chaos, uncertainty, and nobody knows about it, that what would happen in Supreme Court, in the Parliament. So this is the reason that government has completed its homework. It has been doing this, engaging all parties in the past 3 months, and they were trying to get past all this, what exactly they now have brought to the Parliament. And this could be an opportunity for the government to put strong hold on what they had been struggling in the previous PDM government. They failed to do it, but now it has been 7 months down the line.
Right. Thank you so much, Zahid Saab. Thank you for your very valuable time. Thank you for being with us. I know that you're very busy looking at what's happening all over. Thank you. Daniyal, why oppose it then, without knowing what it is? Is it just the kind of politics that we've seen? Because Ummar also and Zahid Saab also have gone to some length to express that we don't really know the text at this time. There were all these rumors circulating, since 2 days on what this means. Why make it controversial?
It's very interesting, this question you asked, and the party that we're talking about, which is opposing, and they didn't even care to read the text, and yet they're drawing their salaries, other perks and privileges. They were fighting over the Public Accounts Committee or whatever piece of share of power that they can get. They will fight over that. So it's this is enough to tell the public their mentality. And one thing that Ummar was saying about the floor crossing law, I personally think that there should be a punishment against it because of 2 reasons. First of all, in Pakistan, see, our political fabric, it's very different from the Western world. So when people vote, they vote for parties. So after that, if somebody floor crosses, he should have the decency to resign and then go back to his constituency, contest the election on that new whatever he thinks is right, and then he should come in Parliament. I think it's very wrong that you contest on a party's platform and then later on you floor cross and then you switch sides. And secondly, it's going to open a gateway of horse trading, and the chief executive will always be.
But Daniyal, we talk about this, and I mean, I'm just saying that if you don't agree, for example, that the argument on the flip side is that we don't know we don't know whether it's actually going to be changed or if there is an amendment there on the agenda. The question is, if a lot of people who come into the assemblies, and we all know, spend, a horrendous amount of money and resources to come into the parliament. They come with a certain belief, they come with an own view of what they want to do for their own constituencies, separate from what their leadership has also. They know the issues of their own constituents, they know the issues of their own areas, and they come, and one would hope, and most of the people, contrary to what is thrown around on the media, come in good faith to make changes. If they don't agree with their leadership, or they don't agree with the direction in which their leadership is going, and they want to still make those changes, and they think perhaps another political party better expresses their thought or is probably a better fit for them, why, principally speaking, why not decide to do that?
First of all, because the mandate they were given was for a political party and an ideology. If they contested on a party's platform with a 5-year mandate, the genius behind having a 5-year mandate is because it's a lot of decisions which because the government has to make proactive decisions.
But it's debatable, right? Maybe they came, it's not necessarily because they feel that they came for those 5 years for that political. The vote bank can be their own. The vote bank can be.
Then they can resign and contest again?
On those humongous resources that they will have to do, and the by-election that the state will have to
the whole argument,
sure that
the whole argument that I'm trying to make is that the chief executive should not constantly be blackmailed, and there should be a stability, a 5-year tenure, so that he can deliver, and whatever policies he makes, like in the first or second or third year, maybe he's not able to, the people are not able to reap the benefits. So he should be given the due time, which is 5 years, so that by then we can better assess the performance of the government.
But I also think that there's a lot that has come, like you said, that horse trading is a term that has come out, and then there's also not necessarily, I'm not saying that it hasn't happened in the past, and this may not be the popular opinion, that horse trading may not necessarily be behind somebody flipping sides or changing. I'm just saying, democratically speaking, in a democracy principally, and the other side, this is the flip side. That's all that I'm saying. Let me go to Ummar, and then I'll come to you. Ummar, review is pending as far as the decision, the order that we saw that came yesterday. What is your opinion on it, legally speaking? There's a lot of issues in it. We've also seen criticism come from different lawyers saying that the order itself does not address amendments, the Amendment Act 2024. And the provisions within it. Of course, we don't, the detailed order will come, but...
You're referring to the CM moved by the ECP,
yes.
Right? So we await the detailed order. We await the detailed order. It was a short order. Now there's another order on a CM. The initial order, I understand that the judges will have to peg it very creatively. Under several provisions of the article of the Constitution, because the conclusion that they reached in the short order was a surprising one, I will admit. So one has to be very creative, and one has to be leaning on the principles of substantive justice for them to arrive on that order that they did. Just to add one more thing, Mahrukh. Not everything is bad, although there are aspects of this package that we hear as of now, one can be critical of. For instance, 4 addition of the members in the parliamentary committee for the appointment of the judges, and I raised this argument earlier as well. In the 18th amendment, at the time the parliament wanted to do this. They wanted greater scrutiny of the appointees that come through the rank of judicial college. The court at the time pushed it back, and then their concerns were addressed through the 19th amendment. It was made a spineless, toothless forum that would never reject the recommendation that would come from the judiciary on the appointments of judges. So this thing, if it is there, that is inclusion of 4 members from the parliament, we welcome that move. We would also welcome the move if the proceedings take place for these appointments to the Superior Court.
Even if there's a constitutional court?
Absolutely, that principle applies to the Constitutional Court and to all appointments in Superior Courts, to High Courts, to Supreme Court. There should even be, something similar to a congressional hearing which takes place for the US Supreme Court. For us here in for appointments to the high courts and the Supreme Court and the Federal Constitutional Court if we have one. So this is good for accountability, this is good for democracy. But of course, there are aspects, for instance, appointing one of the 4 members who are senior most to be the next Chief Justice. That is something which is controversial if this goes through, because this is not something that we've flirted with in the past in our constitutional history. It's going to be a novel step. Right now, it's too early to call whether it will be good or bad for democracy.
Right, fair enough. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this segment. We're going to be taking a short break, after which we'll come back to talk about the economic indicators that we've seen and what it means for the economy at this time. Will it translate to everyone overall as far as inflation is concerned, as far as stability overall is concerned? Please stay with us. Welcome back. We have with us Dr. Usman Chohan, who is an advisor on economy. Thank you for being with us. Usman, we always like hearing your opinion on economy overall. In terms of now, isn't it, we have some good news as far as the positive indicators that we've seen, come out as far as, are they a source of encouragement for you and I, for everyone? How do you look at it?
First of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a great pleasure. Yes, there are some positive indicators that are worth talking about. There's 3 primarily that stand out. The first is that the remittances are increasing. It's a good indication of how inflows from abroad are coming to shore up our reserves at home. The second factor is an interest rate cut happened, which is good, although I believe a larger cut needs to happen and needs to happen fast. And the third is that we expect fuel prices to come down and therefore ease the burden on the consumer. So if you have at least 3 factors like this, you're already seeing a shift towards the better, which is worth talking about.
The government is adamant and resolved towards economic reforms. We've also seen, S.N. Iqbal Saab talk about this and the focus on socio-economic and judicial reforms which are going to be garnered and towards accelerating Pakistan's development, of course, and of course ensuring stability because it has its own effects overall. The kind of reforms that we're looking at on the agenda overall, how hopeful are you?
I believe that there has been a lot that has been put on the table in our negotiations with the IMF, and it has been a bitter pill to swallow because sweeping nature of reforms have been demanded. And therefore, I think that proceeding along that path of reforms is already happening, which is a very good thing. The pace at which it will happen will depend on the political space that the government feels it has, as well as how the public reacts. So far, the public deserves credit for being very patient given how difficult the scope and size of the reforms are. And the third is how the IMF also gauges the overall global economy. You see, because they expect us to keep interest rates at a high level. They have not given any indication that it should come down. But when our inflation has come down so much, it is 9% in the last indication, then we should have an interest rate that is 9% or 10% max. The real interest rate cannot be this large. And so my point to you about, in your question about reforms is that the pace is very important, but there will be exogenous factors determining how fast it can be done.
Usman, we talk about reforms. There's a lot that the government is planning to, in terms of doing away with what they feel are white elephants, doing away with what they feel, are a no-gainer as far as their own. We've also seen, a lot of government enterprises are concerned. We've also seen a lot of headway there. How do you look at this? How do you look at the pace of it? Are you positive with regard to this, and you think that it's going along at the right pace? Because it's certainly a very difficult thing for any government to do.
You're absolutely right. you're absolutely right that it's very difficult to do, and so you cannot imagine it happening in one fell swoop. However, I think a lot of the burden has been put on the federal government, where in fact the white elephants are across Pakistan, not in the federating units, and therefore the provinces have to take a greater share of responsibility in this. There was a lot of motivation in the previous months, a lot of rhetoric and a lot of positive movement and momentum towards change, but you will face resistance every step of the way. Now the thing is, as long as we can keep that momentum of reform, it can be executed in a timely manner. But it's not just the federation, it goes further down in the system that you have to make these important reforms, and there the pushback seems to be very vehement. Perhaps they have to get on board with this bigger picture now.
Usman, we are looking at, today we are looking at judicial constitutional amendments in the NA, judicial reforms, and with the government at this time, with the numbers that they have, for any kind of reform really, which requires, for example, agreement from all parties, is certainly a difficult task. It's certainly, even with regard to economic reform, taking all parties on board and ensuring that they move forward with this is, going to be difficult. But we are seeing the government forge ahead. We are seeing them move forward. We are also seeing the resolve there. How, commendable do you think this is, and how the pace of it, again, when we talk about things like inflation and the way that they've come down, you yourself have mentioned, are we looking at a further downward trend?
Yes, there's two parts to your question. One is about the domestic element of it and the hindrances that are put up, whether by taking things to court and leaving them to hang there, or as the second part of your question, how does the exogenous environment, the global environment, shape up over the next few quarters? On the domestic front, it is true that it has been a very easy tactic by reticent agents to push things into the courts, whether it is trying to avoid a tax bill or something bigger, and then things deliberate and things drag on, and it's a very quick way to do that. So the judiciary has and will always have a very significant role in determining our economic growth. And I would argue that countries such as the United States were built by their courts. Their development was driven by the courts, not by their Congress and not by the executive. The same will happen here, where judicial performance will have a very strong impact, where judicial performance is both the fairness as well as the speed at which things are done. And so we typically don't think of the judiciary as an economic agent per se, but the importance of judiciary in economics is very, very significant. So in terms of encumbrances, certainly you can suspect that many people will try to drag things that are part of the reform agenda into the courts. Now, on the second part of your question about how the global economic environment is shaping up, in fact, there are very positive signs for emerging markets like ours. The reason is that the U.S. Federal Reserve, so the main agent determining monetary policy in the United States, has figured out that the economy can be brought to a soft landing, that they may avoid a recession and yet bring down the interest rates in a calm manner. Therefore, all other countries that have some relationship to the dollar are also adjusting their interest rates downward, also keeping in mind that inflation is coming down, which is what the Fed was looking at. Since we had such a good indication in the last month, we thought that maybe the state bank would be more proactive in reducing its rates. It went for a 2% cut, so from 19.5 to 17.5, which is still an astronomical number. But inflation is at 9%, so how can you have a positive 8% real interest rate, which means subtracting for inflation, and then expect business to do well? So what I'm saying is that business is expecting the environment to get better in Pakistan, and therefore it is poised to make investments and take things on, but it is waiting for a more decent interest rate to materialize. And I think the state bank is doing it too slowly. It's of course in the right direction, but given the drastic drop in inflation, it should be more drastic in its cuts for the monetary policy to drive business investment, especially because businesses have had a very hard time in the emerging markets overall since 2022, and so they're gunning for growth again, and we also have to start gunning for growth to drive further positive indicators, as we talked about.
You meant the indicators also. Why is, to use a, we'll be coming back after a short break, after which we'll talk more about the positive indicators in the economy. Please stay with us. Right, welcome back. Usman, I was about to ask you, there is, as far as the IMF is concerned, why do you think it's being so hard on us to say it in layman's terms with the conditionalities at this time?
Well, whenever there's a problem with something, you can always attribute it to two factors. Either somebody is stupid or they're evil. And I don't think that the IMF is stupid. So there is probably something deeper that is going on. And this is not a conspiracy theory type position. This is in fact not even targeted at Pakistan per se. This is part of a broader austerity paradigm which the IMF has put in place in many countries to the severe detriment. But saying that it is evil is unfair, because the IMF is also fed up with certain countries, not just Pakistan, but certain countries continually coming to it for aid. As you know, we have gone 24 times to the IMF. So the IMF is saying, let's stop this affair once and for all and put in such deep and striking systemic reforms that you don't need to come to us anymore. The IMF benefits most from a diverse portfolio of recipients, and instead it is constantly engaged with a select number of them. And on the other side, Pakistan has gone to the IMF 24 times, and yet it still needs to go again. Sometimes you could understand that the global economy is very shaky, but sometimes you figure that we have to get our house in order too. So this is a very acrimonious and unpleasant.
Do you think it also has to do with overall, our geostrategic position and other factors that, invariably do influence IMF, and one can't rule them out really?
Yes, one cannot rule out geopolitics, global geopolitics in the economic sphere. You're absolutely right. But there is enough evidence on our domestic front alone as an explanatory factor. The geopolitics is certainly there, but the fact is that we were not prepared for the global crisis that happened after the pandemic. We did an excellent job during COVID, but the way the world has shifted, because we couldn't predict the war that took place in Eastern Europe or what is happening now in the Middle East. There's just so much volatility in the world that countries like ours get swept earlier than everybody else. So what I would like to do is to shore up our reserves, strengthen the structure of the federation and the provinces, drive business activity, increase the taxation breadth rather than depth, and promote renewable energy, invest in education, and have a resilient economy so that the next time this happens, it is cyclical and it will happen, maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades from now. When it happens, we are far more ready to deal with it. And so you have to think on a long term, and you should be ready by then to say goodbye to the IMF. And maybe the IMF, inshallah, hopefully is redundant for the rest of the world too, that no country needs to go to it ever.
Thank you so much, and on that positive note for being with us, Dr. Usman Chohan. Your take on economy is always welcome. Thank you for being with us. Overall, of course, we've seen the positive indicators. We've seen the inflation come down considerably. We've seen the stabilization as far as the dollar is concerned. And we've seen the bank interest rate by 200 basis points come down. We've also overall looking at more of this as far as Pakistan is concerned. Stability certainly seems to be on the horizon. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.